Resolution of the House of Assembly of the Commonwealth of Dominica for a vote of no confidence in the ability of the Prime Minister, Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit, to manage the economy of the Commonwealth of Dominica. Whereas the Prime Minister has presided over the closure and or failure of a number of local and foreign companies leading up to the recent exit of Ross University School of Medicine, a 40-year-old investment that grew to become the largest single private sector contributor to economic activity in the Commonwealth of Dominica. And whereas the Commonwealth of Dominica lost this valuable investment that positively impacted the lives and livelihoods of thousands of citizens because government failed to provide the nation with mature healthcare delivery systems, proper infrastructure, and adequate air access. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this Honourable House expresses its lack of confidence in the ability of the Prime Minister, Honourable Roosevelt Skerrit, to manage the economy of the Commonwealth of Dominica. The economy of the Commonwealth of Dominica is the system of how money is made and used in the Commonwealth of Dominica. It is about the careful use of money, resources, and means of production, how people earn a living, self-preserve, hopefully grow wealth, and expand into the universe pursuant to the gift of life. All around the world, economies run by governments that respect the rights of citizens and abide by the rule of law do better. They deliver more jobs, more foreign exchange, attract more investments, and grow faster than the economies under government, like the one we have had in Dominica over the past 14 years, that are hostile to the rights of citizens and the rule of law. In the past 14 years, under the watch of this Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the economy of Dominica has been largely running on the spot, going nowhere fast. Sometimes it has taken a few steps forward, only to be followed by a few steps backward. But for the most part, it has been going through the pretense of motion while remaining at a standstill. Over the past 14 years, the Dominica economy has suffered from a chronic lack of economic policy leadership, resulting in low and declining growth, rising unemployment, and increasing poverty. In the 10-year period ending 2016, the Dominican economy grew at an average of less than 1% per year, well below the 5 to 7% required to generate sustained employment and to reduce the incidence of poverty. Last year, the year of Hurricane Maria, economic activity declined by 4.3%, and this year it is projected to decline a further 14 to 16%. To understand how we compare with the other countries of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, we take a look at key economic indicators for selected OECS countries.
Gross domestic product, GDP, the total value of goods and services in the economy, in billions of EC dollars, 2017, Dominica, the only country in the selected group of 5 OECS countries with a GDP of less than $2 billion. GDP growth, the average over the past 5 years, Dominica, the only country in the grouping registering negative growth on average over the 5-year period. Debt to GDP ratio, there you see the bar of Dominica climbing higher than the others. That's because it has the highest debt to GDP ratio at 82.7%, which makes it last in that category. The current account balance, the sum of the balance of trade, the difference between our exports and our imports as a percentage of GDP in 2017. Again, Dominica, the worst performer. The exports of goods and services in billions of EC dollars for 2017. Dominica, the worst performer there. The total value for goods and services under $240 million. Credit to the private sector. That's against the background of all the boast of we doing better than everybody else and having all of this money. Here is the story regarding credit to the private sector, lending for productive purposes. Dominica, the only country with less than $1 billion in credit to the private sector for 2017. And the foreign direct investment, FDI, average of the past 5 years in millions of EC dollars, Dominica only 10.2 million compared to everybody else who is above and beyond 200 million. St. Kitts crossed the $400 million mark. All of these 7 indicators, Dominica easily the worst performer in the selected countries of the OECS. Antigua and Barbuda is not included in the survey, but of course everyone knows how much better the Antiguan economy is doing compared to Dominica, as evidenced by the number of Dominicans who can find employment in Antigua and Barbuda.
These numbers, these indicators, taken from the IMF Article 4 staff reports. Characteristically, in today's Dominica, we find no jobs, low-paying jobs, the lowest minimum wage in the OECS, working poor people, no savings, the unpaid monthly bills are piling up, land, houses, vehicles and appliances are being repossessed. The economy is in shambles, and we are witnessing the consequent social ills, particularly among the youth, where unemployment is most acute. This is the result of an economy under the direction of a Prime Minister and Minister of Finance who is either unable to deal with the fundamentals of growing a national economy for the benefit of the people, or is perfecting a model designed to enrich ministers of government while making the people poor, dependent, and vulnerable. The Prime Minister and Minister of Finance believes that the economy is by definition the revenue and expenditure operations of government. Accordingly, the administration's key performance indicator of economic success is the amount of money in the custody of government from taxation, from grants, and from the sale of passports. It doesn't like to see the people of Dominica earning their own money, spending their own money, and driving economic growth with increasing disposable income. There can be no confidence in the ability of such a leader to manage the economy of the Commonwealth of Dominica. In terms of tourism, touted as the lead growth engine, when we come to the critical indicator of overall visitors spending in the OECS tourism destinations, Dominica is at the bottom of the group with an average visitor spend of less than $200 million. The biggest setback to growth within the tourism sector is the lack of proper air access, manifested through the government's failure after 18 years in office and more public money per year than any previous administration had ever seen to embark on the building of an international airport. 18 years ago, this administration came into office and met a detailed feasibility study, an environmental impact assessment, a comprehensive agreement for financing, money in the bank, and land already purchased in the most suitable location for an international airport in Dominica. And under this cannot do DLP government, the country is now much further away from having this critical tool for economic growth than it was 18 years ago. The situation in tourism is made worse by high accommodation and related costs and stay-over business, and continuous failures in attempts to grow the cruise sector, resulting in an inability to favorably compete with regional destinations. Regrettably, this DLP administration, under the leadership of the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, is proud of its tourism management performance that has kept Dominica 15 to 20 years behind regional destinations in terms of utilizing the critical tools to drive growth in the sector. The DLP government is now speaking of an international airport and a cruise village. Must have facilities that our neighbors put in place decades ago. In 2006, Dominica had 400,000 cruise passenger arrivals compared to 200,000 in St. Kitts. By 2016, the St. Kitts cruise product climbed to over 1 million passengers while Dominica continued to struggle below 400,000 passengers. In 10 years, while a sister country grew its product fivefold, the DLP condemned Dominica's cruise business to woeful stagnation. Cruise spending in St. Kitts is almost 6 times more than Dominica, and St. Kitts has almost 1,000 more cruise sector jobs than Dominica. St. Kitts and Nevis employs over 24,500 people at a minimum wage of $1,200 per month in its population of 54,000 people, compared to 22,000 people employed in Dominica at a minimum wage of less than $700 per month for a population of 72,000 people. And somewhere I heard this is the best that the Prime Minister and his cabinet of 18 ministers can do for the economy of the Commonwealth of Dominica. Under the watch of this Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, government stood aside and looked as galloping unemployment, grinding poverty, disappearance of the middle class, rising crime, and degradation of social services slapped us in the face each and every day. Government achieved and cemented our position as the smallest and weakest economy in the independent states of the English-speaking Caribbean. At the same time, government led the way in employing non-national companies and professionals to do work that local companies and local professionals can do. Government could not facilitate the private sector as the main engine of economic growth. It could not enhance the climate for doing business and creating jobs. Government could not diversify from traditional agriculture into non-traditional crops, promotion of exports, and increase in value added. We lost half of our agricultural output and over 5,000 private sector jobs in the last 14 years. We deposited a lot of money in the banks, but could not convince the banks to lend enough money from those deposits for productive purposes. Government could not bring the gift of a coffee plant into operation. Government could not complete the Morocco Hotel with Moroccan government money after bungling for 7 years. Government could not build an international airport. It could not develop a proper seaport. It could not build a cruise ship village. Government could not facilitate a reduction of energy costs so as to achieve a reduction of electricity tariffs and thereby secure an increase in the competitiveness and viability of business operations. Government stood aside and looked as company after company in manufacturing, services, and technology closed their doors. Government stood aside and looked as Ross University Medical School, the largest single private sector contributor to economic activity in Dominica, left our shores after 40 years in our 40th year of independence. The departure of Ross cancels a range of benefits that have been part and parcel of the Dominica economic landscape for decades, with no viable alternative under a Dominica Labour Party government of 18 ministers that behaved as though the significant impact on national economic activity is neither here nor there.
I wanted this morning to give the country a heads up that anytime from now, Ross University will announce its departure from Dominica. Ross, I am satisfied, tried everything. Certainly they tried everything.
So the Prime Minister is satisfied that Ross tried everything. In his leadership responsibility for the economy, the question is, what exactly did the Prime Minister try? April 5th, 2018, 8:30 a.m. Lisa Wardell, President and Chief Executive Officer of Adtalem Global Education, the owner of Ross University School of Medicine, arrives in Dominica by private charter with a senior executive team. The owners of Ross wanted to see the Prime Minister, but he refused and condemned them instead to meet with a low-level delegation. Later in the evening, Around 6:30 p.m., CEO Wardell and her team left Dominica. On that historic day, Roosevelt Skerrit could not have met with the head of a $5 billion corporation about the operations of the single largest investor in the economy of Dominica because he was too busy settling a political score. The national interest of securing the future of a vital contributor to the lives and livelihoods of thousands of Dominicans was not as important to him as the petty, partisan political matter of bringing a once strong critic into his team. He snubbed the owners of Ross to devote his time on April 5th, 2018 to the capture of an opposition member of parliament.
Skerrit must go. So Dominicans have to decide whether they want a dictator to run the country or they want a team of people who stand in for democracy to run the country. We are resolved that he has to resign. Skerrit must go.
And I intend, as the leader of the government, to request a meeting with Mr. Isaac at the earliest convenience to discuss and determine a framework by which we can work together.
But while he played the self-interest politics that has characterized governance post-Maria, Attalem was positioning Ross for a future outside of Dominica.
We made our first visit to Barbados to explore new locations on May 31st. Later, we have come to an agreement to relocate the school, which could only happen with a leader and a government with a bias to action to advance education and healthcare in Barbados.
In Barbados, a leader and a government with a bias to action to advance education and healthcare. In Dominica, a leader and a government with no bias to action to advance education and healthcare. And somewhere I read, a leader who cannot ensure the health and education of future citizens is ensuring poverty.
Our new location will include state-of-the-art facilities and new student housing. In addition, Barbados has a mature healthcare delivery system, including a teaching hospital to support our students and faculty, infrastructure that can support the size of the RUSM student body, and considerable direct flights from the United States and Canada.
The reasons Ross left present the most compelling evidence yet of this government's failure under the leadership of the Prime Minister to take care of the vital interests of healthcare, education, public infrastructure, and air access, which are critical to the successful functioning of any economy. The failure of the Dominica Labour Party government to respond adequately to the needs of Ross and thereby secure its return reflects a hostility to the independence people enjoy from earning their own money, a lack of understanding of the investment umbrella that covers Ross, and an inability to nurture foreign investment relationships in a competitive global environment. The woeful decline in the services at the National Hospital, while Ross was becoming a first-rate medical school, bears eloquent testimony of the incompetence that has led us to this failure under the leadership of a Prime Minister who actually took over direct responsibility for Ross University from the Ministry of Health and appears to have turned the medical board, previously responsible for Ross, into his puppet of convenience. Attempts by the Prime Minister and his team to soft-soap the exit of Ross as a blessing in disguise and an open door to the passport money hotels in the Portsmouth area are disingenuous and insensitive to those whose economic hopes and dreams have been shattered by this government's cluelessness and incompetence. We cannot move on successfully if we don't take heed of the lessons of our history with Ross and resolve the lack of confidence in this Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mike Douglas, in the Labour Party of Patrick John, saw the opportunity and made it happen 40 years ago. The Ross relationship with Dominica survived and thrived through 6 prime ministers and their administrations. It died and was laid to rest under the Roosevelt Skerrit administration, while Mike's son, Ian, sang, "How Great Thou Art."
I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunders. My God, to all the universe display. My God, how great thou art.
U.S. company investments in Dominica cannot be successfully facilitated by a government with a hostile foreign policy to the U.S. Medical school investments will not work in the Dominica environment of poor healthcare facilities, substandard infrastructure, and a government with no passion, no bias for action to enhance vital national interests. The Skerrit administration did not have the ability to keep Ross in Dominica after 40 years, and therefore does not have the ability to facilitate the successful operations of even the passport money hotels being built in the Portsmouth area. There can be no confidence in the leader directly responsible for this massive blow to an economy that has struggled at best under his watch. Since Hurricane Maria, the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance has turned the volume up on the boast that we are to become the first climate resilient country in the world. The climate resilient challenge, of course, is not new to us. Under the leadership and management of the Prime Minister, government has been pursuing a low-carbon, climate-resilient development strategy since 2012, with support from climate finance donors and development cooperation partners. The strategy outlines specific resilience-enhancing deliverables. Over $100 million of climate change donor money was available. What exactly did we achieve? In 2015, Tropical Storm Erica flooded away assets estimated at 100% of GDP, and in 2017, economic value estimated at 226% of GDP went south in the devastating winds and floodwaters of Hurricane Maria. How much of the damage visited on Dominica in those 2 disasters was the result of things that had to be done but were not done? The oversized cabinet of the Prime Minister now includes a minister who this year, 2018, forcefully explained why there should be no confidence in the Prime Minister to manage the economy of Dominica.
They're trying to use resources of the state and they brought it in Parliament, where they actually come with a fake talk about small business, trying to get people to support them through a fake small business strategy, where they promising people and have you promising you for 3-4 years, so that they can drag you along just before election to give you the money. So it's like a bribe. It's a bribe early. The Environmental Coordinating Unit, right back in 2010, 2012, they actually developed a document called Low Carbon Climate Resilient Development Strategy for Dominica. The cabinet approved it. So since 2012, we had that plan in place, approved or endorsed by cabinet, but they did nothing about it. But it's showing again, the cabinet does not have the capacity, and we don't have the capacity within his management team. I think they have got a lot of corrupt practices. For example, I'll tell you, the bridge, I'm very, very, very concerned. Because if all engineers, everybody in quantity surveying, civil engineering, I put in the experts in the area telling you that bridge cannot be $18 million. So what else can it be? It must be some corrupt means, because one you didn't tender it. I'll say the government have a lot of corrupt practices that need to change. After 18 years of Labour Party administration in office, instead people blame Labour Party for the lack of effective management of the economy and the country. They blame the opposition. But the opposition has not been in office for 18 years. You understand? So you cannot blame me if, for example, we don't have exports. You cannot blame me if, for example, we're making a decision to pay $18 million for a bridge. You cannot blame me, for example, if people are brutal pulling all on their roof still and the government is not doing anything significant to help them. So you have to blame the government.
Let me tell you, if you are a boss man and you're the boss man of Dominica with your vote, so you are our employers. If a man is not working for you, you fire him.
Of course, the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance has not been working for the people of Dominica. The evidence is clear in the number of no-bid contracts awarded to Barbadian interests, no doubt on the advice of his Barbadian political advisor and his Barbadian economic advisor, and fittingly, his advice with respect to his non-performance is that he should be fired. He has failed to provide macroeconomic incentives to the private sector to facilitate reconstruction and the much-needed private sector jobs and other economic benefits that will be generated therefrom. He has failed to account to the people of Dominica for the $270 million debt forgiven by Venezuela to help with the economic management responsibility of post-Maria reconstruction. Even so, he remains hell-bent on Venezuelaizing the economy of Dominica into total collapse. He has failed to direct proper execution of the emergency response grant to farmers, resulting in partisan distribution to party supporters without checks and balances as to whether funds were used for replanting, thereby stifling the resuscitation of the agricultural sector. Under the leadership and management of this Prime Minister post-Maria, we have seen the wholesale hoarding of building supplies paid for from the public purse and intended to provide relief to affected households.
Yes, I see minister here. Lumber like rain. It's private lumber yard. Schools uncover. Government buildings uncover. The library uncover. All that. Health centers uncover.
He has stifled the reconstruction efforts and therefore starved the multiplier effect that otherwise would have created an upsurge in economic activity across the island. He has failed to provide a strategic roadmap and guidance to the financial sector for across-the-board treatment of non-performing loans as a result of Maria, thereby further locking private capital from the market. Instead of a strategic focus on the best interests of the economy, the decision was left to the banks to decide what was best for them. This Prime Minister and Minister of Finance has failed to provide macroeconomic incentives to allow Dominicans who left the island after Maria a pathway to return to their country. As a consequence, the population has declined, purchasing power has dwindled, and consumer expenditure is at an all-time low, creating a drag on taxes needed to fund government's recurrent expenditure. The Prime Minister and Minister of Finance has failed to provide the administrative architecture to access foreign aid to begin major public works around the country. People are still driving through rivers and streams on segments of the road network. Temporary Bailey bridges are becoming permanent fixtures as the glacial pace to mobilize reconstruction projects continue to restrain economic activity. There can be no confidence in the ability of this Prime Minister to manage the economy of the Commonwealth of Dominica using a model through which poverty and dependency in the population are engineered to increase, while government receives more money from taxation, charitable grants, and the sale of passports. I commend this motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister to this Honourable House and to the people of the Commonwealth of Dominica. I thank you.
Happy day,